everyone can play a role in innovation. Innovation isn't invention. It's not coming up with a brand new widget necessarily. It's about how to do things better, quicker, more efficiently in a different way than it's been done before. We're seeing a lot of the same folks coming back every year. We're seeing interactions between people that never would have crossed paths before. So that's been a great benefit to the hackathon story.
Hey everyone, welcome back to episode number 2 of Building a Founder Mindset by Onova. I'm Victor, one of your co-hosts, the CEO of Onova.
And I'm Ron, I'm an innovation consultant at Onova.
Awesome. And today we have a very special guest with us. I'll have him introduce himself in a bit, but his name is Rick Pollock from Capgemini. And Capgemini is a very special place in Onova's origin story because I myself originated as a Capgemini employee. And now for the last almost 6 years, Capgemini has been both a partner of ours and a client. So Rick has been very fundamental to that partnership and someone we've been working very closely with and become great friends over the years. But with that, Rick, really want to start with kicking off, having you just give us a quick introduction of yourself and then sharing a bit more about your career journey at Capgemini.
Thanks for having me, Victor. So I'm Rick Pollock. I'm a director focused on innovation on my current client. I started with Capgemini in 2017 and had been doing innovation type work before that, came up through like project management, BA kind of work. So always trying to figure out how things should be done in a new and interesting way to be more efficient or add better value to our customers. So when I came into Capgemini working with our client, they really wanted to do some innovation work, and the new CIO had some experience with hackathons and really valued that in his prior organization. So I was able to make that a reality for the client through the work that I have been doing with Victor and Onova since.
For the sake of today's call, we have a client that we cannot name, but is a large global Fortune 500 organization, and was the foundation of some of the early work that Rick and Onova got to work on together. I realize what might be some helpful context as well for the audience is actually what Capgemini is and what they do for those who may not be familiar. And then I'll share a bit more about the context of our partnership. But Rick, do you want to share more about like Capgemini, your role, and then how it interacts with not only this client specifically that we ran for a hackathon, but what they do for clients in general?
Yeah, so Capgemini is a very large global organization. We're actually based in Paris, but have 360,000 people, something like that globally. So we do a lot of everything. We have engineering folks, we have data analytics folks, we're doing Gen AI kind of work. I work in our cloud and custom application group. And so for this client, we're managing their entire tech stack that runs their facilities globally. And then we're responsible for developing the products, managing them, supporting them. So we work closely with the global IT organization, and that's the CIO I mentioned was our primary stakeholder at that point.
I'll jump into the next question because I wasn't here for this particular piece, but just curious and interested to know, like, how did you and Victor initially first meet?
So I mentioned that the client had wanted to do a hackathon. It was something we were interested in doing to bring some value to the client, but I didn't know anything about hackathons. I'd never been to one. I knew what they were, but didn't know how to pull one off. And at the Capgemini office, this was in probably early 2018, late 2017, we had a fair of all the different groups within Capgemini that were offering people volunteer opportunities. And Victor and Helen were there trying to market their hackathon as a service. And I thought, well, what better connection? Here's some folks at Capgemini that know how to do this. So we had some conversations and realized that there was great synergy between what they were offering and what we needed to do for our client. This client had also never run a hackathon before, so we were all new to it. Bringing Victor and Helen in, though, we got instant, expertise in the space and passion around this. So really, the two of them, with a couple of other volunteers from within Capgemini, helped bring this event to life that ran globally across 6 or 8 different locations at the time. This was in 2018. It was a great way to start the event. It's been going ever strong ever since.
So you mentioned that the CIO of this global brand was interested in hosting or running a hackathon specifically. What elements of a hackathon do you think appealed to them?
So he had done this many times before in his prior company. His main objective actually out of the event was just to make this place a fun place to work. So allowing folks to interact with people that they wouldn't normally interact with, having an opportunity to get outside of their day-to-day responsibility, and ideally come up with new ideas that could really help drive the business. But I say ideally because that was never a mandate, that was never the primary objective. Although since running these hackathons over the last 5 years, some of those ideas have made it into production or have pushed some of the thinking at the client. So there's been that benefit. We're seeing a lot of the same folks coming back every year. We're seeing interactions between people that never would have crossed paths before. So that's been a great benefit to the hackathon story.
I mentioned in my early career, I started actually as a Capgemini employee. That's how I met Rick. And Helen and I, which is my co-founder at Onova, we were doing hackathons on the side for fun. We eventually turned it into our full-time jobs and built this up as an internal startup before spinning it off as our own company. And of course, now partnering with Capgemini, where we go to market together with many of these sort of global Fortune 500 clients. Which Rick has been very instrumental as a partner for us, and now has become a very good friend of ours after now 6+ years. But speaking of turning a role into your full-time job, because part of this is building a founder mindset and exemplifying that you don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur to have that founder mindset. Rick, I know you earlier in your career as well kind of like created a role for yourself and took a risk. Do you want to share more about that experience, that journey?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was in a very similar role to what we're in now, where we're supporting our clients' technology stack. But instead of just taking orders from our clients, I really wanted to bring ideas back to the client. So I created an innovation organization. I got a new title of I was the VP over our innovation work. And so we were coming up with ideas that we thought would help move the business in the right direction. And it was the first time we had ever done something like this. There were certainly challenges along the way, but what was really fun to see is when I think of one particular idea. We had a suggestive sell capability that we thought would be wonderful. We presented to the client and they basically said, no, we don't really want to focus on that right now. But it was about a year later, sales were being challenged and they needed some way to boost sales. And they said, well, what if we could do suggestive selling? And so I pulled out our idea and was able to present it back to them. And because we had done a lot of the thinking around how it would work, we were able to quickly implement that and help drive sales. So this was my particular role. So this was my focus. But what I've been telling people on our account, because we've got thousands of people globally helping support this account, is that everyone can play a role in innovation. Innovation isn't invention. It's not coming up with a brand new widget necessarily. It's about how to do things better, quicker, more efficiently, in a different way than it's been done before. And we have so many people on the ground doing this kind of work that they are actually closer to being able to make those minor changes, which across such a big brand is so important. Cut.
I like that. That was actually fun. It emphasized the point. That's a big part of the founder mindset. Is you're kind of like looking for those opportunities. You never know what's going to happen. But sounds like when the right opportunity came along, you were already ready. You had the thinking in place, which is awesome. One part that really is hard for some folks is that starting moment. For example, it sounds like you were able to, maybe it was like pitched to the right leaders. It sounds like you formed a team, an entirely new organization. Can you share more about specifically how you got those, like that all started? What were like the hardest parts of that and what ended up leading that to kind of successfully take off the ground?
So I actually had a team at the time that was working with our client at their innovation center. So we had a core group of people. And so my ask was really just a little bit incremental, like let's invest one or two people and bring them into the fold to be able to do some work, understanding what was being done at the Innovation Center and doing some things on top of that. So slowly showing the values, showing how we can really change the mindset of our client to bring new ideas to them. We eventually grew. I think we had at least 4 people that were working in internally funded role to bring these ideas back into the client. So it's starting small. Right now, I'm really a one-man person. I don't have a team, but I've got access to lots of different people on the account team that are doing this kind of work. So a lot of what I'm doing now is just leveraging the resources around me. So you don't need a huge investment up front. A lot of what we were doing to start was just a PowerPoint deck saying, hey, here's an idea. Here's what some screens might look like. So you don't even need a full development team. You just need some ideas and a way to message it in a way effectively that gets the point across to identify whether it's something that there's interest in pursuing further.
I love that I think a lot of people get intimidated by this aspect of like being a founder or starting something new, but you've really highlighted that you don't necessarily need every piece thought out. It's about just taking that action. And like you said, that some of the best people to do this is like the people who are on the front lines, who are dealing with customers on a day-to-day basis. And really innovation as a whole is about involving kind of like everyone as part of that organization, both from top down and bottom up. And you've seen all sides of that, which is super cool. Moving now to the actual hackathon component that we ran with this client that we've now, Rick, you and I have been doing together now for now 5+ years. How has the hackathon played into now your greater role within innovation, and if you could speak a bit more to kind of like the impact it's had on this particular client, but then also Capgemini?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's really changed the perception of Capgemini into this client, because before we were just doing work for them, as they asked for it. So I think we're seeing more innovatively. We're also bringing fun into their business by running these events. And the other thing that I found really interesting is we last year we offered to our India team, if somebody won the hackathon, we would bring them back to Chicago. I think I've told you this story, Victor. And so one of the winning teams included somebody from our India team. The rest of his team was outside of India. It was across other parts of the client business in other parts of the world. And so this summer we brought him over from India and had a lunch with all of the people from his team, people he never would have worked with before, not only geographically, but also just because of the types of work that they do. But we all came together for lunch, and it was as if they were friends, had been friends for life. So I think this notion that it brings people together, not just for the 36 hours, but you create relationships that are maintained across distances and across different roles. I still get people coming up to me and asking me when the next one is or what they can do. Everyone wants to be involved in the event. It's really seen as one of the marquee events, both on the client side, but also within Capgemini for the account.
This particular client as well is probably our most complex hackathon that we've ever run, and it's really grown in scale, but really shows kind of like the power, as Rick talks about, like we've had, India as be like a major location, but is running with thousands of people across 40 countries participating largely virtually, but then eight cities or so in person, from Chicago to Sydney to London, UK, which has seen also its cycles of going from mostly in person to then going to completely virtual throughout the pandemic, and then back to kind of like this hybrid state. So speaking of that, I know Ron has a couple questions, kind of like digging into kind of that experience and journey.
How did you overcome some of the challenges of like hosting an event during this period? And like, did you know that the event was still going to happen? Was there like any moments of panic that you have as well?
I never thought the event wouldn't happen. It has too much momentum behind it, too much interest. I wasn't sure exactly what it would look like. I mean, we were planning for hybrid events, I think, up until about 2 months before. It's run in October, and the 2020 was a dicey year. So we thought we'd be able to do some in person. I think in the end we had everyone virtual. So there was some concern about how effective it would be. We have so much great programming that is better in person. And of course, the interactions that you get with people on your team that are in the same location is hard to mimic online. But it did go off successfully. The Onova team brought together the technologies we needed to make sure it was a success. We had, virtual sessions and virtual booths to go into to make sure that people had the support that they needed since they weren't physically on site. So I think it went off really, really well, and the benefit has continued because, as Victor said, we initially did all in person. We didn't have anyone virtual prior to the pandemic, and because of the success of the pandemic virtual event, we have opened it up now to virtual users, so we get more access to people that are in other parts of the world. So that's been a definite benefit. Having said that, I certainly suggest keeping all of the in-person events that we're doing. Having come back from it, it was a much more exciting vibe when we were all in person. But having that ability to do mixed hybrid is really helped grow the events beyond just the folks that are in some of our main locations.
And like speaking of growing the event as well, I think there was an aspect. So like last year, you ended up traveling all the way to like Pune, India, which is I'm sure like quite a bit of an experience as well. So like maybe talk about some of your experience there itself, and then also like how it was maybe different to like Chicago as well.
Yeah. So I did travel to Pune. I had about a week and a half notice. I said, we need to make sure we have some good coverage there. We need the people engaged there. And I complained enough to my leadership that they made me in charge of making that happen. So I think I had about a week and a half notice. I was planning to be here in Chicago for the event, but went to Pune, my first time in India, by the way. So lots of impressions just by going to a brand new country. But it was wonderful to see how engaged the folks were there, because being in Chicago, you just see folks virtually, and they come and go, and you're just not as engaged with them. So folks really seemed excited about having folks from the U.S. there. Because I had been running the event for a few years, I was acting as a mentor to the folks there. So I was able to really immerse myself in the teams that were there. We had maybe a dozen or so teams that were local in Pune. We had a couple of other locations in India as well. But I was in Pune, and really enjoyed it, connecting with the folks in India, helping them drive their solutions to something that was more as applicable as possible to the client's needs. So wonderful experience, and next year I hope to look to travel again, maybe to another location, because it is great to get around the globe to see folks face to face.
I think you've spoken a lot to the people element and the engagement element and culture building of something like a hackathon. So I want to dig in more into the actual innovation side as well, and where you think the hackathon has played into, one, maybe adding things to the work that your team does in the roadmap, but also for this particular client, things that they saw as really successful from an innovation side of things.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great things about the event, the way this event is structured, is that you have to come up with challenges. So you're really connecting with people in the business to collect their specific challenges. A lot of times, as I said, sometimes we're just getting a list of what we need to go build. But this allowed us access to folks from across multiple disciplines in the business to understand where their challenges were. And we've used that input to drive events that we do for the client outside of the hackathon. So it's a great way to just understand your client better, because you're understanding what their specific challenges are that they're trying to solve. Beyond that, we had a couple of specific ideas that have made it into production. So getting folks focused on a specific issue that may not get the attention or the breadth of experience and disciplines, focus on a single problem over the course of 24 or 36 hours is really important. And then having that senior leadership engagement, not only in the front end with the challenges, as I mentioned, but also in the judging process. So these are people that understand the base problem and can challenge the teams, help figure out how that solution might fit more appropriately into the business. And then through mentors from those different disciplines, helping the teams really elaborate their idea in a way that's meaningful to address the problem that was stated in the challenge.
And I know you talked about like many of the ideas making it to production. I know one of the ideas, without I know sharing too much, had kind of gone live across like hundreds of locations of this client. Just curious if you could speak a little more to that and kind of like that journey.
Yeah, so this was a challenge in one of the markets that was trying to do some work with delivery. And during the pandemic, there was an issue with people being close to each other. So the idea of being able to roll out a solution that metered the delivery people to make sure that they were only approaching the business um, as the product was ready was an important way to manage that, but also then a value to the drivers because they knew then like they didn't need to waste their time going in until the product was ready, and therefore they could do things that were maybe more efficient for them in their vehicle. So again, not a problem that maybe pre-pandemic wasn't as big of a deal, but because of the pandemic and because the focus on this was something that then they were able to roll out across one of their markets.
Super cool. Yeah, and I know that happened only a few short months after the hackathon as well.
One of my next questions, so you've touched on like, the actual in-person experience itself, like how the hackathon brings a lot of fun, you're able to travel and this global aspect of it. So I want to ask maybe, what are some memorable moments specifically for you in terms of the hackathon, as well as also the planning process that goes involved as part of it?
Lots of moments in planning. It's a massive event that takes months to plan. Typically, we start planning soon after we finish the prior year's event. So it's a lot of work throughout. Early on, we were doing swag that we shipped out ourselves. So we spent a lot of time packaging that stuff up. We've since found more efficient ways. We've innovated around that that work, but it was a fun event, like to get all the volunteers together to pull that, um, to put all of that together. Certainly, when I see ideas making it into production, like Victor just asked me, I think that's a really great moment. Those are things that get a lot of visibility and press coverage within the client as a recognition of the outcome of the event. It's also just fun. I mean, it sounds silly, but we spend 36 hours through a Thursday night, in the client's office building, and there's just something about being in an office space with hundreds of other people in the middle of the night, lots of energy, lots of activities going on, and one of the things that I think about is playing Code Names, which is a board game that I'd never seen before that I played with a bunch of people at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was with a bunch of colleagues that I didn't spend a lot of time with, but was able to get to know better and learn about this game, and it was a great fun. Now we own the game and play it a lot because it's so much fun. But I think just the general, the camaraderie you create through these events, interacting with people, seeing the activity, the passion behind the teams. It's unlike anything I've experienced before.
Did you ever stay overnight at one of the locations?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For the first few years, I stayed overnight, stayed in the office the entire time. One suggestion I have is the first time I didn't go to sleep at all. So I thought the next year I was like, I'll just take it easy. I'll just take a 45-minute nap. Would not recommend that. That was too short of a time. I felt worse afterwards. I have had the luxury of staying in the Onova not bed and Airbnb a couple of times and gotten some sleep. In Pune, for whatever reason, they didn't want me to spend the night, so I went back to my hotel room and got like 5 hours of sleep, and I felt fantastic. But most people stay up all night or will take short breaks, maybe an hour or so. But it's still amazing by the end, the passion, the excitement that's still coursing through the event itself. So no matter how long you do it, it's still a good time.
I know planning the hackathon is something largely that you do on the side outside of your day job, Rick. So what brings you back sort of like year over year, doing this like consistently from starting in year one and then many more years beyond? Like, what would you say, yeah, continues to bring you back?
Well, it's a great fun, and it has become one of my yearly objectives in my company. So it's no longer a side gig. Initially, it was like, hey, let's try this out and see how it goes, and now it's stuck. So I'm not sure I could get rid of it, even if I didn't, even if I wanted to, but I absolutely do not. It's just it's fun to plan. The people that are planning it are all, Onova comes in and helps orchestrate all the work that needs to be done. But when I'm working with folks on the client side or within the Capgemini team, this is all volunteer work for them because they enjoy it as well. So it just tends to be a good group of people that are really interested in pulling off a great event. So I've met some great people just in the organization of it itself, and wouldn't give it up. They'd have to pry it out of my hands.
You and Victor have like known each other for quite a while now, and you were recently at his wedding in Bali this year. I just want to like know like more about like how have you like been able to maintain this like personal friendship as well as this working relationship at the same time?
Well, as I said, I'm all the folks I work with throughout the year planning these events, we become friends just through that. It's always a collaborative effort, and it's fun to see people and talk about ideas to how to improve the event itself. And then when Victor comes into town for the events itself, we try to do something. I think I took you and your team out on my sailboat last summer. So just taking the opportunities when we are together to do things that aren't business related, and because he's so good at what he does, it's easy to not have a contentious relationship. I don't know how else to say it. He and Victor are some of the most wonderful people that I've worked with. So it's not hard. It's not a challenge in any way whatsoever.
Thanks, Rick. We did not pay him to say that, but thank you.
I guess to like close off, like one of the final questions we want to ask, like what's next for you, Riz? Like are there any like personal aspirations that you have like outside of like working at Capgemini as well?
Oh, outside of working for Capgemini. Um, yeah, I mean, I love sailing. I mentioned taking them out on the boat. It's something I've done all my life, not a lot, but more so in the last few years. So I'm trying to figure out how I can do more of that in maybe the next chapter of my life. But I will say within Capgemini, I've actually, as I said, I innovated my role previously. Last summer, a year ago summer, I took a sabbatical for 12 weeks because I wanted to do something different. I had done a lot of the technical innovation work, but wanted to try something different. When I came back, I moved into more of a strategic role and have been defining my role ever since in different ways, finding new and interesting things that keep me engaged. I'm doing marketing work now. I was on some sales calls this morning, still doing some innovation, and certainly will maintain the hackathon work, but just trying to do something different. So I think it's up to each person out there to figure out what it is that makes you want to do, want to go to work in the morning, because you'll be better at it and you'll have more fun than if you let somebody else dictate what that is. So I'm not sure what the next chapter will hold, but it'll be something that keeps me engaged and passionate and excited about what I'm doing.
Exciting. And it's part of that, like embracing that ambiguity of sorts, but also carving your own path. That's really part of that founder mindset. So, are there any tips that you sort of have for whether it's other, let's say, folks who work at large corporations who are looking to either like spearhead new initiatives, or people who maybe want to jump off and do things on their own?
You need to find a way to do something that you really love doing. And it doesn't mean that that needs to be your full-time job, but get involved in a group within your company or do some things on the side at night. Just make sure you're doing something that gets you excited, because those are the things, A, that will keep you going, but also can create new opportunities for you. Helen and Victor said, we want to do a hackathon. So they created this service. They were able to validate that they liked that and then grew their own business out of it. I knew what I didn't want to be doing, and so I shifted into and started growing and coming up with things that I wanted to try doing. You constantly need to be sort of innovating yourself, right? Coming up with the next version of yourself and making sure that there's always something that is really driving you. It doesn't mean that you're going to love every part of your job necessarily, But if you find enough things that really drive your passion, you're going to be good at that, and ideally be able to focus more and more on those things and less on those things that don't bring you that kind of joy.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Rick. I feel energized. I feel inspired. I think that was such amazing advice, and just your journey as well throughout your career, the risks that you've taken and what you've been able to build for yourself is just super cool to see. And I think will be very inspiring as well for many of those tuning in. That's it for episode number 2. Look forward to hearing, or for you guys to tune in for our next episode. But again, thanks, Rick. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you. Have a good one.